Job interviewers of Reddit. What are some things people do because they think it will impress you, but actually have the opposite effect? Story 1. During an interview for a permanent, full-time position, I asked a candidate the relatively standard, "Where do you see yourself in X years?" question. Her response, in a very bragging tone, was, "Well, my husband is doing very well for himself and is planning to take early retirement in 5 months. So when he retires, we'll both be retiring and moving to the south of France." Yeah, I'm not going to employ someone for a permanent role that requires a month of training who's going to hang around for 5 months maximum. So I guess don't do that. Edit to answer a couple of common questions from replies. One, it's a dumb question, surely. I was working through a series of standard questions the company expected us to ask candidates, so I literally had no choice but to ask it, regardless. It's an okay question for some roles. They might want to see that your ambitions fit with company goals, or they might just want to see that you've actually thought about it. 2, what's the correct response? This depends on the role in question. There's no perfect answer, and it's more about how you answer the question. Usually talking about developing your skills, mentioning doing a couple of responsibilities that aren't in the job spec, but are probably in the next level up, or frankly any response that implies you'll still be someone we want to employ. Avoid being too ambitious. I'm going to be your boss by then. Avoid implying you'll be leaving for certain, and avoid saying that you'll be exactly the same as you are now. I'm expecting to train and develop you to some extent if you're expecting to get no better at doing a job in 5 years. That's a massive red flag. Story 2 only happened once, but when I asked a guy about going above and beyond to make a customer happy, he told me a story about him breaking the rules at a construction site to let 2 teenagers write their names in the concrete. Edit how do words. Edit 2 how do top comment. Story 3 had a student applying for an entry-level IT internship. His resume said he was fluent in Cantonese and Mandarin. Just for fun, I decided to check. I'm a randomly fluent white guy. He did not, in fact, speak any Mandarin at all. Still hired him and turned out to be one of my best interns ever. But it did raise a red flag that was entirely avoidable. Story 4, throwing around technical jargon that is meant to go over the head of the interviewer and impress them. I guess it's only happened one time, but it was very memorable because my background is engineering, not sales. I don't believe the candidate bothered to look up my LI profile. So I was very aware that he was misusing terms, confusing technologies in an attempt to show how smart he was. He wasn't. The other interviewer was impressed with how much he knew until I explained it was all a bunch of well-worded but wrong bullshit. If he did that in front of client head, have zero credibility. Advise stay in your lane and talk to the job you're applying for. Story 5, I wasn't the interviewer, just the one who processed the applications and called them to confirm the interviews. I had someone tell me I don't know anything because my dad never made me work right after I invited her for an interview. She was bragging. Story 6, I once asked a girl what the best constructive criticism she'd ever received was. She answered by telling me a long story about how one of her high school teachers told her that she was a follower, not a leader, which apparently upset her so much that she whipped off a novel of an email to the teacher explaining all of the things that she felt made her a leader. Her tone throughout the entire answer was one of absolute disbelief, like she was shocked and disgusted that someone dared call her a follower over 4 years ago. She clearly thought it was a great answer that illustrated her willingness to stand up for herself and be a leader, but all I heard was that she completely misunderstood my question, was unable to think of any actual examples of constructive criticism in her life, something a student in a creative major should have tons of, and roundly rejected criticism given to her by her superiors. So, don't do that. Actually listen to the questions the interviewer is asking you, and then answer them. Story 7, we were hiring for a teacher position, and I was one of 5 in the panel. Our school color is red. This guy, 22 years old, straight out of college, came the color red, literally in red hair, red eyebrows, complete red suit and tie, red shoes with a red resume. It was difficult not to laugh. Story 8, when they know everything being asked. So many have been caught out when asked follow-up questions to explain. It just turns me off immediately when they're caught in a lie. Tip, if you don't know something being asked or don't have the experience, just be genuine about it. I personally don't expect anyone to ace the interview. Edit forgot a word. Story 9, I made fun of the fact that the interviewer was from NJ. What exit did you live off? Wanted to impress her with a good old insult from back home. Didn't work. Story 10, ignore the woman who is also interviewing you and answer her questions while looking at me and direct all your questions at me. Interviewers often have BS culture fit conversations, but I've found just giving people common opportunities to be in, like including a diverse set of interviewers, is plenty to find out who you really don't want to work with. Story 11, name dropping someone they know that works at the company, not a reference. I've sat on a couple interviews where the interviewee dropped the name of an employee and it was someone who isn't well liked. Story 12, oh man, I'm a recruiter, so that's literally all I do all day. I had a man brag to me about going above and beyond by doing extra at work because women don't think they should have to do things themselves. I'm a woman. I had a woman tell me she's such a hard worker, unlike this new, lazy generation. I'm a millennial. I had an Asian woman at an old job talk to my boss that was in the interview with us and was trying to make it seem like she works so well with all different people and try to show this by asking my black boss what his favorite flavor Kool-Aid is and where he gets his soul food. Story 13, rambling. Dear God, the rambling. They'll just go on and on and on with an unrelated answer to your question. Sometimes it's okay just not to have an answer. Also, the button-up suit coat. It's weird, guys. It's weird. Story 14, my biggest weakness is that I get too involved in my work, and it's hard to focus on something else. Ugh. Rolls eyes at it to address the replies I've gotten. I use this question to gauge honesty. If you tell me you at math or can't count your ABCs without singing the song, you'll know you're a truthful person. I can tell when an answer is a cop-out and someone is trying to tell me something they think I want to hear. Good examples of answers. IMO are being bad at public speaking. On the spot math 2 answers I read in the replies here. Didn't attend or complete college, overly stressed when projects have a deadline, unable to handle heavy workloads, the inability to keep personal problem from affecting your work life. If someone tells me that last one especially, I respect them for not being afraid to tell me the truth. It gauges honesty, and I'd rather hire an honest person than a liar. What else could they have lied about on their application or resume? Story 15, bashing their previous current company. I don't know why some people do it, but it's very unbecoming. When asked the question of why did you leave your previous position, don't say, because you hated your boss, or that it was a terrible place to work, or go on a long drawn-out rant that ended with HR firing you. Story 16, if someone is not considered for a second interview, it'll send them a friendly rejection notice that lets them know we hired someone else, and then wish them luck in their job search. There are people who have replied to these like, well, I have an interview at place this week, and they offer more than you put in your job description. Okay, is that supposed to impress me or make me regret not hiring you? Also, there's something to be said for persistence. But if you're rejected multiple times, please stop calling on the status of your application or calling to demand an interview. Story 17, people like to BS answers to questions. I guess they think it makes us think they know their stuff. The reality is that here in IT, if you go through a whole interview and don't say, I don't know, but this is how I find out, you're probably not getting hired. We can tell when you're BSing a technical question. Story 18, I've had interviews where the hopeful candidate starts bragging about doing something illegal when Husha was younger. In general, don't talk to me like we're buddies at a bar together. Also, I'm not impressed by yes men. Don't just regurgitate back to me what you think I want to hear. I want to hear your own thoughts, as well as you can articulate them, and provide specific examples. And if you're having trouble with a question, just politely ask me to rephrase or provide an example. Story 19, we believe in growth in this company, especially from this help desk position. What areas of IT are you most interested in for future career growth? I am up for anything, dude. IT is a big field. I get you just want to score a job and not lock yourself in, but saying I've been interested in security networking DBA sysadmin and would like to learn more to see if that's a good path for me is a way stronger answer. Story 20, giving a bullshit answer to why do you want to work here. Don't give BS answers. I had one girl claim she wanted to work at company name because she read our core competencies and they aligned with her blah, blah, blah. It's a bullshit answer and it makes you seem like a fraud. On the other hand, I had a guy tell me 2010 recession, something along the lines of, at this point in time in economy, they'll take the first reasonable offer I get and work my out from there. Honest to the point, we not drones, we're people too. You're at the interview because you're qualified. I'm trying to figure out who I want to spend 40 hours a week with. It's the bullshitter. Story 21, I'm friends with the person who interviews for jobs at our technology company. And the conversation goes as follows him. So on a scale to 1 to 10, how good would you say your knowledge level about phones are? Interviewee 10, him okay, great. So tell me what you know about Apple products. Interviewee, I'm not sure. I've never worked with an Apple phone before. Him okay, what kind of phone do you use? Interviewee, I don't even know, it's some type of Android, denied for the job. Story 22, overselling strength. I can train a hard worker who has the ability to learn underpresenting weaknesses I need, and you need to know if this is a good fit. No one wins if I hire you. It's a poor fit, and you and I are looking again. That wastes time and money. I'm investing in you and want the same. Story 23, I'm terrible at interviews. I filled out my first application at 17. The boss came out to talk with me, small town. Everyone knows everyone. Asked if I realized I'd spell my name wrong. Story 24 advice to interviewers moaning about people coming too early. Don't change the time of the interview. Let them wait. It doesn't have to disturb your schedule at all. And it could be that they had a transport choice of being too early or not being sure if they would be on time. Remember, they don't really know the commute yet. Also, they just might want to get a feel for the place while they calm their nerves and prepare. Story 25, when I was first out of college and looking for a job, an older person told me I ought to print out a stack of resumes and walk into every company in my town that is related to my industry and introduce myself. After working for several years now, I see that's a pretty terrible idea. We are busy during the day. We aren't even hiring most of the time anyway. If you want to do something like that, please send us an email. You give me a paper resume. I can guarantee it's going in the trash as soon as I get back to my office if you try to make it cute or something crazy like 7 pages. We will actually pass it around the office, but probably not in the way you intended for us to. Story 26, I had a guy do a 30-minute Skype video interview without a shirt on. I guess he thought he had an excellent body, but since it was for a software developer position, it didn't matter. He didn't get the job. Story 27, pulling out your phone. A lady who was applying to be a delivery driver was interviewing with me, and I asked her if she's ever done any volunteering. We're very involved with the community, running drives and fundraisers, and stuff. She pulls out her phone to scroll through her Instagram feed to a picture from 3 years ago. Over 5 minutes of silence, and she finally gets to the picture, which was her twerking on a baby elephant at a wildlife sanctuary. Don't ever pull out your phone during interview for one, and especially don't show your potential future boss an almost naked picture of you, but for two. Story 28, show up super early. Not that it has the opposite effect, but I'm interviewing like 6 people in a day. If your time is 2 p.m. and you show up at 1, I'm likely still talking to someone else. Story 29, my co-manager and I interviewed a man for a supervisor position who was obviously qualified for the position, and he knew it. Every question we asked him, he would give an unexpected answer, then explain his answer and connect it back to the question in a roundabout way. Every answer he gave took at least 5 minutes of explaining, because he was trying to be clever. Luckily, it was a phone interview, so the entire time my co-manager and I were looking at each other like, what is this guy talking about? He would have been a shoo-in for the job if he would have just answered questions normally. It's been several years ago, so I can't remember any of the specific questions or answers, but they were over the top ridiculous, and he was 100% serious about them. Story 30, list an absurd amount of technology's keywords on their resume. That just means they're trying to game an algorithm. Meanwhile, I have no idea what you're actually good at because you've just listed everything you've ever touched. You're hiding your actual skills in the middle of a pile of bullshit. Story 31, I asked my interviewees to talk about a time they had a conflict with a coworker and to tell me how they navigated that situation. I've had more than one person respond that the conflict they had was being more qualified than their supervisor, and then proceed to tell me how hard it was to work for someone who doesn't know as much as they do. I know that happens sometimes, but it's not a great way to answer that question. Story 32, ITT, interviewers who have no concept of what it's like to actually have to apply for jobs, asking BS questions and complaining that the responses they get are appropriately BS in return. Garbage in, garbage out people. Ask better questions. Stop viewing applicants as if they could just walk away from your application without a care and don't have any bills to pay. Story 33, I've interviewed people before that apparently got too comfortable with me while we were talking because they started swearing and telling inappropriate stories like it would make them more relatable until you actually know your boss better, aka not before the interview is over. Don't drop the professional act, especially if you're faking it. Story 34, interviewer, what is your biggest weakness? Candidate, I'm too honest. Interviewer, I don't see honesty as a weakness. Candidate, I don't give what you think. Story 35, personal tics. Once saw a girl in an interview get so nervous that she kept reaching up to pick her nose, and then suddenly she would catch herself and put the booger in her mouth, suddenly hoping that nobody would notice. Don't let your nervousness get to the point that you're doing things that are more distracting than the answers you're giving to the questions being posed to you. Story 36, me. Hi, I'm Darker Thamisal. I'm the current manager, and I'll be interviewing you today. You've applied to take over my job role as practice manager, which will include 4 weeks of training by myself before I leave. Any questions before we start the interview in full? Person A, hold on. While you're the manager, you're about the size of 10-year-old. Except you've got a banging body in that uniform. Right body? Big. You're sexy, me. And that's how you don't get the job. You know where the exit is? Thank you. I was on Skype with my boss as well. He was mortified and felt like he needed to apologize to me. Story 37, my biggest pet peeve is what I call the wee weasel. I hire mostly engineers, technicians, etc. If I ask what candidates did during a previous position and they talk about how we did X, I ask follow-ups to determine what pieces they actually did and what they contributed. If I can't get to that answer, it's a no-go. Stop trying to take credit for the entire world and tell me what you can actually do. Story 38. I know someone who had audition actors. One of them showed up with his brother, who was a minor celebrity, said semi-famous brother popped his head into the audition room to say hello. Yeah, didn't win the guy apart. No one gives you your brother was semi-famous. Story 39. We had someone rock up for an interview as a welder, and we told him he would be performing an on-the-spot test piece. Well, the bloke rocked up in full dress clothes, long-sleeve button-up shoes, a tie, the works. Straight off the bat, this shows a complete lack of awareness. It was made incredibly clear that it would be a manual job, and we expected a sample of his work. He stood around in the workshop chatting for a few minutes, and then asked for a managerial job. We told him where to go, and he later applied again for the same job. So basically, don't apply for a job you don't want or refuse to do the tests that are given to you. You waste everyone's time, and it just pisses people off. Story 40. I recruit 3 days a month as part of my job. We have a question that says, what do you know about the company? It's a pretty open-ended question, and we're looking for something that's not necessarily important to the job role, but shows that you've researched a little further than the About Us page of the website. My company's page says has how many cups of tea we serve a year, and I swear to God that every other candidate proudly states that we serve 52 million cups of tea a year. That's great, but I really like it when the candidate talks about the department history or a scheme that my company runs that they agree with. I had one candidate who was applying for a customer-facing role say how she saw that we have a group that volunteers to help maintain the gardens around the company HQ in exchange for professional advice from our company gardener. I didn't even know we had a company gardener. This impressed me. Nothing to do with the job she was applying for, but she knew about something we offered, and she showed an interest and wanted to be a part in it. Also, when we ask a tell us a time when you ask question, we know when you're making it up. Story 41. I work in network security. If you interview with me, don't admit to multiple felonies during the interview. I am sure you hacked AOL in 1994 to get all the leftover minutes in your state and were able to hack our Wi-Fi from the parking lot. We don't have Wi-Fi, and he had used the default password to someone in the apartment complex behind us. Story 42. I've been a recruiter for about 8 years. I don't have a great answer for this question because I really try to take my interviews in stride at this point. I sometimes find myself judging petty things, and I've been trying to check that, whether nerves, awkwardness, or bad advice, which is plentiful. People do see crazy things in interviews. But so do hiring managers and, admittedly, recruiters. Something that worked for someone one time with one audience isn't necessarily going to work with another. I think we all just need to respect the individual in the interview and value the fact that they have a different worldview. Sorry if that's not the intended response. Just my take after thousands of interviews. Story 43. It seems like a lot of interviewers ask questions that might be more suited to be asked by a sociologist or a psychologist, and not sure they're even interpreting the answers correctly. Might be best to ask straightforward job-related questions, as opposed to if you were tree questions. Story 44. I work in design, and I always ask this question to candidates on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being excellent. How would you rate your Photoshop Illustrator skills? And more often than I would have ever thought, especially when I interviewed candidates for an internship, they would say some number above 10. I quickly would always reply with, wow, you would rate your skill as a 15? I mean, I don't even consider myself an 8. You should be teaching me, since there's nothing I could really teach you here in this internship. It's amazing how quickly they try to backtrack. Moral of the story, you can always learn more and get better. Story 45. Generally being cocky or brash turns me off a candidate immediately. The only positions I've hired for generally involve tackling squirmy and difficult technical problems. Anyone carrying themselves like they can solve these problems easily is usually full of or has no experience doing real work. I'd way prefer to see an interviewee get interested in a question I've asked them, ask for details, and think it out. Even ask the interview team how we would approach it after they've given their answer. Showing engagement and an ability to break down questions problems is way more impressive than just having an answer ready. Story 46. I once had to interview someone for a software engineering job. He was coming from academia. I was literally handed his resume seconds before meeting him. I asked a simple question to break the ice while I glanced over his resume. Me, hi. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Him, everything you need to know about me is on my resume. Me, okay, I'm done here. Thanks for coming in. He didn't get the job. Story 47. Telling me about how they called into a conference call at work when they were in the ICU or some other crazy situation to show their dedication. I want humans, not robots. And I don't want competition within my team to see who can sacrifice more of their personal life, health, family, relationship, whatever, trying to impress a corporation that will lay them off the second they need to pump earnings. Story 48, they get so stuck on trying to tell me they're smart. I can read your resume and speak with you for 5 minutes and know if you're smart. Need to know if you're kind, a hard worker, and willing to drink the Kool-Aid. I am an expert at teaching people how to do the job. Well, show me you're a good person. Story 49, you probably haven't experienced this because you're HR, but insert answer alternate version include you've never had to. You probably don't know what I'm talking about. And my personal favorite, you're just HR. So let me overly explain like you're 3 years old, bruh. We met 3 minutes ago, and you already know my life story. I bet you also know how this interview is going to end too. Story 50, I haven't run across this one being mentioned, yet people who engage in some variety of cyber stalking, dude connection requests on LinkedIn, FB, Twitter, Insta, and then quoting things to me in a cold email from the blog that I once had years and years ago, doesn't make me want to hire you. It makes you creepy. Story 51, this thread has been a vicious reminder of how Asperger's is a friggin' death knock for social graces. Ask the right questions, give truthful but diplomatic answers on the spot. I'm lucky to make it through an interview without flubbing up on basic answers. I can barely think fast enough to keep up with the canned HR questions, let alone improvise answers, and keep a cheery conversation going in the bylines. Story 52, acting like a big shot or being rude to my admin assistant instead of being polite. A smile and thank you go a very long way. She has a lot of influence in my hiring decisions. I respect her, appreciate everything she does to help me, and rely on her judgment. She coordinates with the candidate and others to set everything up, meets the candidate in the lobby to bring her into a conference room, offers water, coffee, etc. When she's asking pleasant questions, she's getting a read on the candidate. She has more touch points with the candidate than I do. After everything is done and she's shown the candidate out, I ask her what her impressions are, even if a candidate nailed the interview with myself and my colleagues. If Husha was rude to her, then it's over. Happens more than one might think. Story 53, about a year ago, my exec chef was hiring a new Sue. When asked what his weaknesses were, this one candidate say, he had no weaknesses. My boss just straight up said there was no way he could work with someone like that. Huh? Story 54, interviewing people for a software development job. I've seen several people list their skills in their resume and rank themselves graphically like this. I just find it very off-putting, especially when someone ranks themselves 100 but only worked with that technology for like 2 years. But the thing that bugs me most is those rankings have no scale. So like WTF, and I suppose it do with your skill ranking that it has no scale legends, and B is totally arbitrarily based on your fuzzy feelings anyway. WTF, people. Story 55, I once was handed a resume and told to pay special attention to the achievements line. Fair enough. So I looked down, and what does the first line say? I have achieved over 100,000 gamer score on Xbox Live through determination and perseverance to mastering my craft. He didn't get the job. Story 56, I always got annoyed when people told me what they thought I wanted to hear. I hired for a pretty big retailer, and their policy was always you be you. When I would ask a question like tell me about some of your hobbies or passions, people love to respond with I'm really passionate about working hard. This is hardly ever true and not what I want to know. I want to know if you'll be happy and productive in the company and which role would best suit you. There were many times when someone answered honestly, and I could place them in a higher paying position based on that response. An example was when someone mentioned they didn't really like talking to people and enjoyed alone time. Well, kid, you applied for a cashier position, but you can come in and do signage and shipment and never have to talk to anyone. You can answer questions honestly and still get the job. I value honesty above bullshitting me, and most hiring managers can tell you're not being truthful. Story 57 had a candidate today that replied to so, you had a chance to look through our website and take a look at what we do, right? Did you want me to clarify anything with yes, I did, but I'd love to hear it from you. Story 58, my favorite part of this thread, is all the people telling managers, well, your question is just dumb. It's a trap because there are a lot of replies in this thread from people I'm very much trying not to hire. Story 59, after the interview, calling every single day to see if they got the job. A thank you and a follow-up call are great, but don't demonstrate just how annoying you will be to have around. Story 60, honesty. Seriously, telling me that the main reason you want this job is because you need something to do for summer and want money is probably not the best way to go, especially when I'm offering an internship in a field you expressed interest in and applied to your degree program. Story 61, not admitting they don't know the answer is something. I'm actually super impressed when someone has the courage and honesty to say, I don't know, rather than trying to fake it. Story 62. So I'm not an employer, but my father is. He told me this one guy bad-mouthed the last company he was working in and kept on talking about his boss. It has the same effect of talking trash about your ex. Not great and doesn't impress anyone. Story 63. Don't pretend like you don't have any flaws. I will hire a flawed individual over a liar 10 times out of 10. When I ask you what is your biggest weakness in the workplace, don't say nothing. And when I ask you about your relationship with previous managers, don't talk about how shitty they all were. Just those two things alone are an immediate way to not get hired, even if you overqualify for the position. If you can't recognize your own flaws, odds are all your managers were probably calling you out on flaws you can't accept you have. Bad managers exist. But if you can't find a single nice thing to say about a single manager you've had in your decade of job hopping, I don't want you on my team. Clear and simple. Also, if you can't recognize your own flaws, you can't take steps towards fixing them. A person who thinks they are perfect will never move forward in life because they think they're already at their best, and that's a level of ignorance I won't tolerate in a professional or a casual environment. Story 64. I was interviewing with the head of the department, and noticed he has one banana and 2 boiled eggs on his desk. My mind made a penis reference, and I immediately blurted out. I ended up working for the department. To my surprise, I think character really takes you far. I'm sure many on this thread would have crossed me out right then and there, but being able to work for a boss who appreciates my kind of humor is definitely worth the shot. I mean, I'm going to start making penis jokes sooner or later, so I might as well give you a heads up, haha. Story 65, making a big deal of the specific program or major or university you went to. A few years back, I was on a sequence of interview panels for the energy company I was working at, and we were interviewing for a variety of positions, mostly in engineering or planning roles. 2 memorable young men definitely did not get hired. One was recently graduated from Harvard Business School and brought that point up in several discussions like it was a big deal, and that should be enough of a qualification to get him whatever job was available. It would have been much more interesting if he asked us some questions about our business and reflected something had internalized from case studies or whatever and shown how this fairly expensive degree was going to make him more valuable to the company. The other young man was just out of investment banking internship and thought this job would be comparable in pay. No, sorry bro, only investment banks pay like investment banks. Actually, the best interviewees I've had are ex-military. They tend to be the most humble and pay the most attention to the interview questions and have the best grasp of the general situation. Doesn't mean they always get the job. In fact, some of these folks are massively overqualified, but they tend to be very smooth interviews. Story 66, I hire for positions in human services. Telling me you're the right candidate because you are dedicated to helping people literally means nothing to me. Of course you are, but what makes you different than anyone else saying the same thing? Story 67, I interviewed an actual hoarder about 2 months ago. She pulled up in her car filled to the roof with trash. She was interviewing for a receptionist position. She insisted that I have copies of every single honor, award, letter of recommendation, and achievement she earned since 1983. It was all bullshit team awards and achievements made by her office as a whole. Lastly, she found me on Facebook, FR requested me, and emailed me saying I should hire her before she left the parking lot. Story 68, I interviewed a young adult who had applied to be a leader, sort of surrogate parent for younger teenagers for the summer. Wanting to know how he might handle some difficult and clearly taboo areas with teens, I asked what steps he would take if he found one of his underage wards using illegal drugs. I was hoping to hear about promptly stopping and confiscating the drugs, confirming the health and safety of others, determining how they had gotten them, discussing with his supervisors about how and when police, parents, and medical officials should become involved. Nope, he said, well, that would depend on your kind of drugs. You know, your hard drugs or just your weed and such. You don't need to worry about your soft drugs, but kids might be able to handle stronger ones. Gently picking my jaw up off the floor were responsible for the safety and well-being of underage children. So I thanked him for applying, ended the meeting, and shared his name with other colleagues, also doing interviews. A week later, I called him to explain why he won't be trusted with the safety of kids that summer. I didn't have to do the last step, but I wanted him to take something from the interview. He clearly hadn't done many and needed some basic coaching. Story 69, overselling your knowledge. Always assume that the HR person and the manager supervisor and anyone you interview with is a genius that knows everything, because you will never be certain of what they don't know. I've sat in or been a secondary interviewer for some technical positions where a bit of a knowledge base is expected per the job description. Problem is they'll ask a simple question and get a really long, elaborate answer with a lot of bullshit thrown, and that means nothing because the person assumes I don't know the ins and outs of their position because I'm too far removed from it. Story 70, I always ask for feedback from job interviews. A company I really wanted to work for said that my having other offers on the table and stating that made me a less desirable candidate since they choose candidates for second-round interviews and full-time positions based off of how likely they are to accept the position as well. It was pretty good feedback that shows even though it might make you seem more desirable as a candidate, you shouldn't try and show your cards until you're already getting an offer. Story 71. I think one of the biggest problems is that people seem to forget that the interviewer is a person as well, who is also likely nervous for lack of a better word. Story 72. Overdone makeup, including glitter. On paper, she was the most qualified for the position. In real life, she looked like she was going to the club, not suited for a professional department reception role. Story 73. Late to the thread. So this will probably get buried. But one thing that drives me crazy is when people launch into long background stories of unrelated experience when I ask a specific question. I start out with open-ended questions early on in the interview. By the time I start asking targeted questions, I know about your general background and want to focus on some specific topics.